Well, good afternoon, Brother Lodge. How are you?
Doing pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Well, I'm doing well, man. I'm glad we finally got this thing connected. Technology is something else when it's not working, you know.
Yeah, I think I had too many things open on my computer as well. I was doing a lot of some books and editing and stuff.
Well, good. We're live now, and I guess we'll just get started with the interview. How's things in St. Louis right now?
Well, right now, as far as the weather, we're getting ready for a wintry storm tonight, so I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. But other than that, everything's going pretty good.
Okay, all right. Well, this is called Preacher Conversations. We're just having two preachers having conversation, and it can go as long as we want it to go, or as short as we want it to go, depending on how the flow goes.
Hmm.
Um, who is Gary Lodge? Tell people in Churches of Christ and people who are associated with the School of Religious Studies know you. I know you. But for the sake of those who are seeing you for the first time, who is Gary Lodge?
Well, basically, I come from Louisiana, down in the on the bayou. I grew up part of my life in St. Gabriel, Louisiana, which is uh, petrochemical industry kind of rules the Mississippi down that way. So we everybody basically would work in petrochemical industry. So I grew up in that. Worked as a mechanical designer for 20 years doing that at Exxon and Shell Chemical. While doing that, I also preached at a church in Baton Rouge and started a congregation there with 20 members, and still striving, still going pretty good. Has about 350 members now, and another young man taking over. Uh, Went to Southwestern Christian College, graduated from there with a BA in Bible, and went on to get a master's degree in theology and then a master's divinity, and from there a doctorate of ministry. And right now, presently, I'm working with the Ferguson Heights Church of Christ here in St. Louis as an interim minister. And also, I'm a hospital chaplain working in hospice division. So that's basically who I am. I'm married with two children, been married for going on 36 years.
Well, yeah, I saw the eyebrow raise. Okay,
Had to think about it because it's coming up. I think it's 37 years coming up.
okay. Well, congratulations and everything.
Mhm.
What years were you at Southwestern?
I went to Southwestern in 1983 through 87. Stayed there
Okay,
3 years.
okay, all right. And so you said after Southwestern, you got your bachelor's, you got your master's, and you also got your doctor of ministry. Where did you do your doctor of ministry work?
I did it here in St. Louis in the Master of Divinity at Eden Theological Seminary.
Okay, congratulations, man.
Oh,
Yeah. How was that? How was that journey? Okay.
a little bit longer than I wanted it to be. And that was due to the fact that the school was going through some transitions and
Yeah.
couldn't get the courses that I wanted to take as quickly as I wanted them. So I had to kind of piecemeal. I could have gone to Aquinas as well and taken some courses there because they wouldn't have cost me anything. But I just felt I'd stick with the same school I started with,
Yeah.
a partnership with Thomas Aquinas. Which,
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit. You say you're from Louisiana,
yeah,
and you started a church in Baton Rouge. Is that correct?
yeah, I actually, I say started, but I started working with them. They had 20 members, and my home congregation had a split. And so when I went to Southwestern, I came back after coming to St. Louis and doing a internship with Dr. David Lane. I went back to Baton Rouge to work in the petrochemical industry once again, and as a piping designer. And that's how I went back to my home congregation, but they had a split, and this small band of 20 people was branched off by themselves, and I went to work with them one Wednesday night, and told them I'd come and work with them and help them out. And from there, I stayed with them for 12 years, and we grew. Actually, I kind of reconstituted the split between 3 of those congregations that split off, and that helped us to gain back and become now perhaps the most prominent African-American Church of Christ in Baton Rouge.
Okay, well, good. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. When did you become a Christian? Can you share with us what I call your conversion experience, or I call it your come to Jesus?
Yeah, that come to Jesus experience was quite a thing for me. So prior to becoming a Christian, as I said, I was in school for the mechanical design, and one of my friends who I was carpooling with, he went home, and we were supposed to meet on a Monday. He was going to pick me up. I called his wife, and she told me he died over the weekend, and that shocked me. And so I had a series of calamities that happened. I called my mom and said, I think I need to, get into church. And she told me, well, I know of this church of Christ on 32nd Street, Church of Christ, and I think you would do well there because there are a lot of young people there, and I think you would benefit from going there. So I went to the congregation, started going. We go to all the Bible studies, and I was at Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and then eventually I went down and got baptized. But by that time, everybody thought that I was already a member because I had been so faithful in coming.
So it was over a period of time, and they welcomed you even before you got baptized. So was that where your mother was going, or?
No, actually, she didn't go there. One of her co-workers was going there,
Mm-hmm.
and she was a younger person, about my age, and so my mom had visited with her, and she just felt that it might be somewhere that'd be good for me to go. Eventually, my mom did become a member, and all of my sisters, and they became members as well. Which I didn't say. I have 4 sisters, and I'm the only boy, and I'm the baby.
Oh my goodness! Oh, okay, yeah. What was that like? Okay.
For me and my dad, it was kind of rough, man. Living in a house with 4 women.
Look, yeah, I can imagine. I have 3 children.
4, but 5.
Yeah, well, I have a son and 2 daughters,
Mm-hmm.
and then when my wife and the daughters, I didn't get a break so much, because you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
But love them to death, and but man, it was. I just have to shake my head sometimes, and everything. Yeah. So how old were you when you became a Christian?
I was 24.
24. Okay. All right. Good. How did you end up at Southwestern? And for those who are watching who are not members of Churches of Christ, Southwestern Christian College is the only Black school of higher learning in Churches of Christ. Produced many gospel preachers, and not just gospel preachers, but great people in other fields as well. My sister actually went to Southwestern. I'm a year older than her, and a group of girls went there from Dayton, Ohio. But how did you end up? How did you hear about Southwestern and end up deciding to go there?
Well, the minister who was at the congregation where I attended, and he and his wife were graduates from Southwestern Christian College. James Harris was the preacher at the congregation, and he was an alumni, and also his wife, and they both had graduated from there. So the other part to that story as to how I ended up at Southwestern was when I went to the congregation that I was attending, I also met a young lady there, and we got married. And she got killed in a car accident 8 months after we got married. And so I was distraught, didn't know what to do. I was about to go to, had an opportunity to go to Detroit and become a mechanical designer out there at the GM plant. But when she got killed, I just kind of shut down and talked to the preacher. And I said, I think I might want to go over to that college. And it wasn't really a inspirational thing as far as going into preaching. I really enjoyed teaching. And so I wanted to enroll in the education curriculum there at Southwestern. But I wanted to study Greek, and my advisor told me, he kind of put me on the track to go down to preaching, but I really was more interested in teaching than preaching. So that's kind of the way I ended up at Southwestern, not so much as a pursue out the ministry, but a respite and kind of to revive myself to get away from the mill and get closer to God.
Well, thanks for sharing that, Dr. Lodge. I wasn't aware of that, and certainly it's been several years, but I'm at a loss for words itself. I want to thank you for sharing. You do have my condolences. That had to be tragic, and at that time. Wow, man. Well, you got to Southwestern, and you mentioned Greek. I consider you to be a Greek scholar. What is it about the languages that has grabbed your attention?
I guess studying languages. In high school I studied Spanish, and I just kind of liked the idea of being able to deal with other people's languages, and then being able to study the Bible in its original language is fruitful, because there are a lot of gaps that need to be bridged together. And I think that if we don't get those original languages in there, we miss a lot of the nuances. I sometimes reading Paul's writings, you can see Paul uses a lot of alliteration, but if you don't know the Greek language, you miss that. And he has a lot of things that he does with the language that makes it very interesting.
Okay, all right. You've got a full plate. You're a chaplain. You're the interim minister at Ferguson Heights Church of Christ, but you're also one of the instructors at the School of Religious Studies in Little Rock, Arkansas. Can you share with this audience the courses that you have taught and the courses that you might be presently teaching?
Basically, the New Testament Greek and the Greek reading, and also the Greek exegesis have been the New Testament courses. We were slated to teach one of the How to Study the Bible curriculum, but I haven't had that opportunity yet. And when you just before you call, I'm working on a workbook for that right now to try and I'm going to be doing something with one of the congregations here, and hopefully to get that out on the market pretty soon.
Okay, all right, sounds good. And how long have you been associated with the School of Religious Study. I'm really trying to put in a plug for Lord Aaron's.
So I've been doing
Yeah.
it for seems like about 10 years, if not more.
Okay.
Off and on, So yeah, I've been about about 10 years. I think we started back up in 2010, probably. Maybe a little more than that.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about the School of Religious Studies, why would you recommend someone attending the School of Religious Studies? And School of Religious Studies is not in competition with any school of higher learning, and it's not a school of preaching. But what are some of the advantages of attending the School of Religious Studies?
I think that one of the things that if you want to go into teaching and preaching, you need to have some kind of training. And I think that the School of Religious Study offers that opportunity to you without you being overwhelmed. Taking it, and the instructors, I think, take more of a hands-on approach and will be able to deal with you as an individual and not as a conglomerate or just as another number. I think we give more personal attention to the student than most other schools will give to you, and you have that accessibility. And I think that's one of the advantages.
Yeah, and also to add to that, some people are not able to go to school full time. They're not able to, and some people are called to ministry or get involved in ministry at a later age in life. And then the School of Religious Studies is as far as expenses are not the same as secondary school, but the school is accredited, and they're also working on providing opportunities where a person can get an associate or bachelor's degree. They can go from the School of Religious Studies and go to college. So they're working on some things. So, there are a lot of advantages. You mentioned that you would rather concentrate on teaching than preaching. Is that correct? Is that okay? Why? Let me ask why.
I have been running from the preaching for 40 years.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess you have to see yourself in as to who you are, and as I said, I didn't go to school. I didn't intend. That was not my intention from the beginning. But when I went to Southwestern and took the Greek, that was a part of the curriculum for the preachers and not necessarily for the teachers. And I think that may be a little bit of a misnomer, but I'm not here to criticize that. So, but most of our churches, you end up having to do a dual role anyway. And we have more need for preachers than we do teachers in the congregational level, at the congregational level. Not that our schools don't need it. So, but I've never really seen myself as a preacher. I try to, I guess, want to make sure that people understand it, and I think the classroom gives that opportunity, and also to see that you're able to help other people do it. And that's the important thing. I think that people who help other people and enable other people to become what they can be are very important. And I think teachers are sometimes overlooked in that realm.
Okay, I want to ask you, when it comes to your approach to preaching, even though that your interest or you have a special interest in teaching, but when it comes to preaching, what type of preacher are you? Topical, textual, expositional? We're into now labeling the approach to preaching. They're narrative preachers. how would you describe your approach to preaching?
Well, I enjoy doing series, and I specifically, since the teaching is part of my DNA, I think that the approach is more expository or expositional, trying to stick with the text. Now, I don't. My first Greek teacher, Dr. Gus Farmer, did tell me not to use Greek in my sermons until I had been preaching for 10 years. And so I still try to take that approach. I don't try and use that a whole lot of it, because that's not the point. The point is to make sure that people understand it. And I think expositional preaching or expository preaching gives that ability to do that. So I kind of like the expositional approach, and being able to stick with a text over a period of time, making sure that people, when they leave, they have a good understanding of that text or the pericope or whatever you want to call it at that particular time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Dr. Lodge, what's it like for you to prepare for a sermon, and especially with you having expertise in the languages? So, you're preparing for a sermon series. What are the steps that you might go through to prepare for that sermon series and then that first sermon?
So the idea is always start off with prayer, praying and asking God to, you already have the revelation, ask God to illuminate it for you. And so the illumination comes by, I will start with reading it, reading the text, making sure that I have a good cursory understanding of it, and then come back and start making observations. And those observations will be, in the simplest terms, the who, how, and when. WHW, who, how, and when, and trying to ask those kind of questions, and then start outlining the text. And from there, looking for the big idea. What is the author trying to say? And once I understand what the author is trying to say, now I've got to try and put it in terms so that the audience can make an application with it. So observation, and then after observation, some interpretation, and from the interpretation, I have to move on to application. And that's kind of the process of doing that. And that observation is simply those three, but there are others: who, how, and when. Who wrote it? Who's he talking to?
Mm-hmm.
How was it written? What kind of, is it a poem? Is it those kind of the genre? And then when and why? Why was it written?
Yeah. That's good. I'm asking a question that I already know the answer to, but I'm asking for the sake of the interview.
Yes.
Have you ever struggled with a text? You go to a text and okay. Can you talk about that?
Let's see. There's one that I'm trying to think. I probably resolved it by now, but I think when Ezekiel and the dry bones, even though I've heard a lot of sermons on that, but you struggle with it and try to figure out exactly what is he talking about. It's metaphorical, but those kind of texts you do struggle with, and I think there are a lot of texts that you just have to put down. You asked me that, and I had one that I wanted to do a sermon on a couple of times. I can't. It was going from my mind yet, and probably because I put it out.
Yeah.
I can't think of what it is, but I've always gone to it and said, no, not yet. Not yet.
Well, I know. Yeah. Not, there are texts that I've looked at. I said, I can't touch it. I got to come back to this. I'm not ready for it. I need to look at it again. And but you mentioned the dry bones, man. We've heard people just really do some injustice to the dry bones, but you know, you want to give them a pass because you know that it's more of a illustration part of their sermon. You know, I mean, I've heard some guys talk about the ankle bone is connected to the
Yeah.
knee bone, and the knee bone is connected to the thigh bone, you know, and all that. And it makes for a lot of fun, but we do need to be serious with our approach to the text. Tell me what is your role as chaplain, and how much time does that take out of your schedule? And I would think that your chaplaincy is part of your ministry, overall ministry. Is that correct? It's not just an occupation, but it's part of your ministry. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. So up until February of last year, I was working full time as a chaplain at the hospital, and I had a co-minister working with me, and he decided that he didn't want to do it anymore. Some things came up personally, so he had to pull out. Not that he didn't want to do it anymore, but so I had to change my career plans, and so I stepped down from the hospital and 5 days a week to 3 days a week, and so I deal with the chaplaincy and went into just dealing with hospice, which is within itself a ministry, not only for those people who own the services, but it helped me greatly with congregational members and death and dying, and learning how to minister. Chaplaincy really changed my ministry completely, and going into clinical pastoral education helped me as a person, because the training really gets you to think about who you are. And I think that all preachers should at least get 1 unit of CPE, because I think it will help them to see who they are and what ministry is about, and kind of identify some of their weaknesses and strengths and be able to play up on them. I'm not exactly sure if I answered your question completely, but I could say more.
Yeah. Well, you know, chaplaincy can be demanding, and especially in the area of hospice, because you're dealing with death, you're dealing with dying. How do you handle that? I mean, does that take a lot out of you? You know, and just tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, it depends. In the hospice is not so. Is many of the people sometimes are uplifting to you, because they, you know, is specifically when you run across people who are Christians, and they have a faith that takes them through, and so to hear somebody say, I have no regrets, I am ready to die, I have taken care of my family, I have taken care of all the things that I need, but most of all, I have taken care of my relationship with God. And to hear that and to be there, and I've gone into members of the Churches of Christ house, and you know, they've lifted me up, because they have sung songs and prayed prayers, and just kind of been a cathartic lift and encouragement to me, as well as not so much as what I can do. And the chaplaincy is not about being doing, it's about being, and just being there and being supportive. So at those times is you know that the person is ready, and so that helps you to know that there's something else on the other side. I have not really seen a whole lot of people struggle the way that we normally think about people dying. It's peaceful and serene, and sometimes comforting to see him go.
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah. Well, I think that's probably an area that's neglected, that, and we probably need to give more attention to, like in our lectureships or workshops, of how to prepare yourself, and then how to prepare others who are going through hospice. That kind of thing. So I said it takes I'm thinking it takes a special kind of person. As ministers, how often we're faced with it, but we're not faced with it like on a daily basis as you would be in the chaplaincy. So it really takes a special person.
Yeah, and I think that I don't know how to explain it. It is, I think that God has given me the ability to do it and to go through it with people. And I think that's the important thing, is knowing that you're working and walking on a journey with people, and you're not there to fix anything or to do anything. You're just there to be with them. And I have had some of the most interesting conversations with people who that just will blow you away. They say things that just confirm your faith. And for me, that's what it's all about, because that's a day that we all will have to
Right.
read.
Yeah. Well, looking back over your journey as a member of the church and as a preacher and teacher, an instructor at School of Religious Studies, who are some church leaders and church members who've made a significant impact in your life?
As I can say, Brother James Harrison, from the beginning, when I first got into the congregation, as I told you, I went continuously, and there was another brother who was not a preacher. He was not a minister, but that brother took me under his wings. And Brother Crusoe, he would take me out after I got baptized. We went out almost every night teaching somebody in-home Bible studies. He and I would just go, and man, he taught me and taught me and taught me and taught me, and so I learned a lot from that brother. And as I said, he had no formal learning. He wasn't a preacher. He wasn't a minister. Had never been to school, but he knew the Bible, and he would encourage me and call me up and, hey man, I got another one. Let's go.
Is he still alive?
Yeah, he's still alive. But he's gotten a little, his Alzheimer's, I think, is setting in, or dementia is setting in.
Okay.
But he's still alive, and so for him, he really shaped and got me. And then Brother Harris got me into started my first sermon. I think that's one of your questions, but I share it with you now. He had this preaching class that he was teaching, and had another brother, younger brother, that was in there. So he encouraged me, come on, Gary, get in the class. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. So I went because he was the other one that would go with us and teach. And
well, I was going to ask you, do you remember what your first sermon was? Do you?
Yes, I do. It was on a Wednesday night, and I preached on gossip.
Oh Lord, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Here's the kicker. So I didn't know any Greek at that time, but I went to Brother Harris, and I wanted to put in there hot theos agape. So he showed me how to spell it out in Greek. So I really I drew it out on the board, which means God is love. That's what that means. So just to tell people. But
okay, yeah.
So
did you do any preaching while you were at Southwestern?
Yeah, I did. I preached at the lectureship, and that I didn't preach in the congregation. No, not like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I did. Matter of fact, I did. Brother David Lane's congregation down in Paris, Texas. I
Okay.
used to go down with Brother A.L. McCoy, and he didn't have a car. I had a car, so I would drive him down there from time to time, and I would fill in and preach sometime for them down there as well.
Now, I've heard you mentioned James Harris, and you just mentioned David Lane. You mentioned Gus Farmer as one of the instructors at Southwestern. Are there any other preachers who maybe stand out, or a sermon that they preach that kind of that you'll always remember that sermon, or you'll always remember that preacher because of a sermon?
Ben Foster came to do a gospel meeting for us before I went to Southwestern, so I didn't know him at that time. But Brother Foster came down and he preached. I did a gospel meeting. I don't remember what the sermon was, but he went down to the 12 tribes of Israel and named all the sons and off and everything, and what tribe they came from and all of this. So that impressed me a lot. And so when I got to Southwestern and got into his biblical survey of biblical, the Old and New Testament, his thing was, you got to give it back to me just like I gave it to you. Give it back just like I gave it to you. So that helped me a lot with my memory and memorizing different things. I don't do it as much as I did, but he impressed me a lot with that.
Yeah.
With the memory. But his brother also, I can't remember, Brother Foster.
Tom Foster.
Thomas.
Tom Foster. Yeah.
Thomas Foster. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I guess those guys, and I guess the Brother Barclay, Richard Barclay, I like him. There are a lot of them that I do that I like a lot. Now I can't leave out Lloyd Harris. He impressed me too because he did a lot of work with us in Baton Rouge as well.
Okay, good. What advice would you give to someone who is just getting started in ministry, or let's say just getting started in ministry? What advice would you give?
Well, my thing was, I did not want to jump right into it without having somebody to guide me and to give me some put the training wheels on. And I know there are a lot of guys that don't perhaps think that they don't need that. So one of the reasons why I did the internship with Brother Lane is because I wanted to learn from somebody. I learned a lot at Southwestern, but it was not all academic, but it was academic primarily and not all practical. So even though I had taken, which I had to another person, Shelton Gibbs was my homiletics teacher, and he did a fine job of teaching me about expository preaching and all that, but I really needed somebody to show me how to do it practically. So I think that working with someone can help you to hone your ego.
Yeah.
Practice humility and cooperation, and it will teach you how to be a team player. So I think that being a team player is very important, which is why I talked about the CPE, because in there you had to learn who you are, and a lot of people can't work with other folk, and which is why we sometimes have splits and things, because egos get in the way. And I think if you can learn to work with somebody.
Well, you mentioned several men who have made a significant impact in our brotherhood, but one of the things that is reoccurring in the interviews that I'm doing that keeps coming up is that another preacher investing in another preacher, depositing, learning from another preacher, relationship with another preacher, a Paul Timothy type of relationship. That keeps coming up. You know, school is important, school is good, but the practical side, the biblical side, the things that you learn just being around another preacher and even Bible. So that keeps coming up over and over again. How would you describe, Dr. Lodge, the current state of the church? You know, so you've been in the church a long time now. So how would you describe the current state of the church?
Okay, let me add one more thing to the before I talk about the current state of the church. The other reason why I think it's important to have the relationship with another preacher is because there are going to be things that you need to talk over and talk through with somebody, and you need somebody that you can trust and who will give you the truth and not necessarily what you want to hear, whether it's you need to change something or not.
Yeah.
So I think that's another benefit to having somebody to share with. But I think the current state of the church, I'm not ready to throw the towel in and say that the church is dying. There are a lot of people who feel that the church is dying because the church is being transformed or is in a transition period. COVID changed a lot of things as to how we do things, and people measure the viability of a church by many times by numbers. That's good, but if the church is stable in other ways besides just having numbers, it's not dying. And so Jesus said that, you know, it's his church and it's not going to die as long as Jesus is alive, and I believe Jesus is alive. So I think that we're in a transitional period and we need to do things differently. I think that we cannot continue to stick with the old ways and evangelism and those kind of things. And so we've got to change the way we do things. Otherwise, we will find ourselves not dying, but out of the loop. And that's, you know.
Yeah. Can you be a little more specific on some things that we can change? And sometimes I wonder, well, we have to deal with COVID because it's here. But if COVID had not came, what were we dealing with before COVID? Mm-hmm. But you know, COVID is here. But what are some things that we need to change specifically?
Well, I think. Well, I say you got me on a specifically. I think that one of the things that we need to change is how we deal with one another as far as our differences on doctrine and how we treat one another. I think that we've always been quick to cut people off without understanding where they're coming from. I think my approach, and I didn't learn it from myself, I learned it from somebody else, and I can't remember who, but it was good. Priscilla and Aquila took Apollos to the side and taught him more fully. And just because a person is where they are now does not mean that they're always going to be there.
Right.
And I like people to look at my life as a motion picture and not a snapshot. Mm-hmm. Because the snapshot is frozen in time. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the church needs to be frozen in time. And I don't think I need to be frozen in time, or anybody needs to be frozen in time. We are constantly moving and we change. Mm-hmm. And so just because I believe something now does not mean that I'm going to believe it later on. So take me and teach me more fully, having understanding and caring for me, and, you know, don't have a propensity to just be right, because we need to be more loving and then just right.
Man, you said a mouthful there. You said something real profound about your life being a motion picture and not a snapshot. And then you said something earlier, and I meant to bring it up when you said it about accountability. Having someone in our life that we can talk to and be accountable with. I think that is so important, even in ministry, because we're talking about ministerial ethics. And we need an accountability group in ministry. Yeah, the playing field is shifting. There's a transition, and there are some doctrinal differences. Somebody just gave me an assignment from Joshua chapter 22, and and then they let me pick the subject for it, and I'm going to call it "Men at the Precipice of Apostasy."
Okay.
When you look at Joshua chapter 22, and you've got those two tribes, and then the half tribe of Manasseh, I think is Gad and Reuben, and then the half tribe of Manasseh, and they built that altar, and then the children of Israel heard about it, and they didn't like that idea of that altar being built, but then they had to have the conversation. And when they had the conversation with the 2.5 tribes, then they found out, well, we're not building the altar for the purpose of worship. They built the altar for another purpose. So, this might be one of those texts I wrestle with because, but at the same time, there has to be conversation, and I like what you said about don't cut a person off. Let's be loving in the conversation, and let's get an understanding, that kind of thing. So, man, you said a mouthful, very profound and everything.
Well, I think another word that counselors use is carefronting. It's not confronting, but it's carefronting, and so you come with care. And my approach always is that I reserve the right to be wrong. I don't know everything, and I could be wrong about some things. And I think that if we take that approach when we come into conversation, you can end. One of my brother Willie Military, he's song leader. He always says this, and I like it. He says, you can't change a man's opinion against his own will.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Lodge, I want to thank you. This has been a great conversation, and appreciate the work that you are doing at Ferguson Heights as interim, and the work that you're doing as chaplain. I really appreciate what you're doing with the School of Religious Studies. I appreciate you for your integrity and your approach to study, and what you bring to our brotherhood from ministry and from the languages, from Greek, and that's needed in our brotherhood. And I'm praying that God will continue to bless what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it, my brother, and thanks for asking me to do this. I just hope that we continue to grow as a people of God, and that we just remember that we're all children of God, and that God wants us to love one another.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Gary Lodge for sharing with us today in these preacher conversations. This is in a partnership with the School of Religious Studies. Dr. Lloyd Harris is the president of the school. We're going to put on the screen the address of the school in case someone wants more information and wants to get in contact with Dr. Harris and the School of Religious Studies. We're thankful for Brother Lodge and pray that he'll continue to be a servant in the kingdom. And we're thankful for those who are watching on today.